So we're starting to record. And now, Prince, if you'd like, go ahead, please.
Okay, great. So in my group, unfortunately, it seems the ones that spoke the most, the young companies, less than 2 years old, and we had that common experience of rejection or discouragement due to the experience of the organization. We also noted similar experiences again, the issue of revenue, that revenue requirements. Funders require, they've got certain thresholds that you must demonstrate as income before they consider you.
Dans la mesure où il faut pouvoir démontrer un certain revenu. Dans notre cas, dans le cas de...
That I represent, we also have come across the funding thresholds as in the minimum or maximum that funders can provide. So in one case, we had a funder telling us that they couldn't afford the amount that we're looking for. Then on the other end, we had a funder saying our funding requirements were too little. So we lie somewhere in between, and we have funds that want to fund more than $2 million US. Yeah. So yeah, those are I think the three main issues.
Perfect.
That we discussed. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing, Prince. And now I think we're going to just go with Clinton and then Florence, and then we're going to pass that over to Looney. If it can be summarized with some quicker points, as Ricky brought up earlier, that will be helpful for us so that we can get to some of Looney's topics. So Clinton, please go ahead and share.
Okay, thank you so much. As we were discussing with my colleagues, we did not discuss about specific businesses, but we just talked about the concepts of the pitch. So one thing we've discovered in common is to say, when you are pitching to someone, an investor who is a stranger to me, or maybe to anyone as an entrepreneur, I have to explain the product and the commodity first. Secondly, I have to go straight into the demand. For example, I can say the world, maybe Africa is in need of 5 million tons of fertilizer, because for you, we need fertilizer. I would explain something like that so that we get to go straight to the demand of a commodity. Then the second aspect is on the potential to scale up. I have an idea, which is maybe to produce fertilizer, or maybe it's organic fertilizer. How are we able to scale up? And then in the next phase, maybe I can talk of maybe the
For me, Clinton seemed to have cut off. So if that's the case, we want to thank you for the points that you shared so far, Clinton. And might want to pass to Florence before passing over to Looney. Florence, would you be able to share?
Okay. Yes, thank you, Amanda. On behalf of Group 6, this is what I've been able to collect from the group. The first thing the group talked about is the issue of when pitching, the story is not just a story, but how do you do it? And then they also talked about the graphics versus using words. The other thing which came up was issue of doing a pitch deck when you are a total startup. And then it is difficult to put the entire company in 5 minutes. They feel the time is kind of short. And then someone said that sometimes the investors are not really clear. Someone wants to give you a loan, then they ask for shares, like, is it loan or equity? And then the other thing is about financials. How do you put the financials in a pitch deck? And yet, then who should present that? Because we don't have like the owner of the company, or one person presenting and the other one being the auditor or the accountant. And there was also an issue about programming I think that didn't come out very well. But the other thing is, if someone is running a social enterprise and the pitches want more of the profits, so how does that come in? And so what all of us expect is that we need to learn more how to do these pitches, and especially issues of financials, and how to condense everything in this short time. From Group 6, thank you.
Well, from over here, we want to thank you three for sharing about that. And now I might like to bring Looney on so that he can share some responses to that.
All right, thanks, Amanda. I was in that group 6, so I heard some of that feedback and made some slides to match. All right, today we're going to talk about pitching.
Hold on, I'm getting that.
Okay. Today we're going to talk about pitching and answer as many of those questions as we can for you. This is based on one of the books I wrote called The Next Step Guide to Pitching Your Idea. Latest version of this talks about storytelling too, but we're not going to get to storytelling today. We're just going to talk about the pitching. Okay. We're not going to answer every single question you asked, because a lot of those are actually in the realities of funding, and we'll get to that in about 2 weeks. But we will just talk about that one moment in time when you're sitting on Zoom or you're sitting at a table with an investor, and you have your 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 minutes to pitch your company. That's what we're talking about today. And so when you're in that situation and you have that opportunity to actually pitch your company live, what are the expectations of the audience? Right. So some of the feedback we heard earlier was they can't write a check big enough, or my company's not big enough, right? The check sizes are too big, too small. It could be someone else had a comment that they might be investors and you might be a social enterprise, and so you care more about the impact and they care more about the returns. Having knowing what the expectations of the audience are is important before you sit down and spend your 5 or 10 or 20 minutes pitching. Right? Do your homework as best you can, either by reading their website to see what they're up to, or just doing a little prep ahead of time. Like it's totally reasonable to ask investors, what's your typical check size? It's totally reasonable to ask your investors, do you care more about the impact or the returns? Like you might be afraid to ask these questions, but no one's going to say no because you asked a few questions ahead of time in order to make sure your pitch was good. All right. The one that most people get wrong is, and I heard this in the feedback, is what's the purpose of this pitch? I heard someone say that 5 minutes isn't enough time to tell everything about your company. And it's true. And neither is 10 minutes or 20 minutes or half an hour or an hour. Right? That's not the purpose of the pitch. The purpose of a pitch, and we're talking about first-time pitches today. Right? Just the first time you're sitting with a given investor, right? So the purpose of that pitch is not to tell them everything about your company. And that seems weird and it seems wrong, but it's not. The purpose of the pitch is to get them to a next meeting where they ask you more questions. That's it. I'm going to repeat that because it's really important. The whole purpose of this pitch I'm going to show you today is not to answer all their questions. The purpose of the pitch is to get to the next meeting. And the purpose of that next meeting is to get to the next meeting. And the purpose of that meeting is to get to the next meeting. You're not going to get an investment from 1 meeting or 2 meetings or 3 meetings. It's going to take many, many months and a lot of meetings with these investors. And so the purpose of every single conversation is to get to the next conversation until finally they send you money. Right? Finally, they send you paperwork to sign and review. And finally, at the very end, they send you money. But we're talking about the very first pitch. The very first pitch is simply to get them excited enough to want to ask you questions. That's it. You just have to give them enough information to have them want to sit down for a few more hours and ask you more. All right, someone asked, who pitches? So someone literally said, and I was in the breakout room, they said, I don't understand who's supposed to pitch the financials because my accountant made them and I don't understand them. And I'll tell you, whoever said that, you're never going to get funded. Sorry, but the reality is, and we'll get to realities of funding some other day, but reality is if you don't understand your financial model, you are never going to be funded. If you don't understand your historic financial reports, you are never going to get funded. So who pitches? The founder CEO pitches, right? And I use founder CEO. That's the expectation of the audience, is that the founder is the CEO, or one of the founders is the CEO, and that person is going to pitch the story, and that person can answer every question. And that's a tough one. And it's possible that the founder hired a CEO. I used to do that in my old days. I wasn't CEO till 10 years ago. So that's reasonable as well. The founder can be in the room and the CEO can be in the room, but the CEO is going to pitch the story, pitch the company, and they have to be able to answer every single question. And that could be, why is this number in this cell on the spreadsheet, even though there's not going to be a spreadsheet today. But at some point, that question is probably going to get asked. And if the CEO can't answer the question, you're not going to get funded. So if one of your weaknesses, we talked about strengths and weaknesses a few weeks back, like in week 1, if one of your weaknesses is you don't understand financials, yeah, you have to fix that. You have to go online and find a class in accounting, and you have to go online and find a class in business financials, and you need to be able to answer those questions. And the same thing's true in marketing, and the same thing's true in sales, and the same thing's true about operations. You need to be able to answer in a reasonable level of knowledge any question about your company. And I'm sorry if that hurts and that's not what you're expecting, but that's what the investors are expecting, because your competition for funding are other entrepreneurs who can do that. So that's just a reality. Okay, and just to drive this home, what knowledge is expected of you? If you go back to that skills map we talked about in week 1, right, which was finance, marketing, sales, operations, fundraising. There's something else in there. You need to be decently educated in all of those. On a scale of 1 to 7, you need to be like a 3 or a 4 on everything. You have to be a well-rounded, knowledgeable entrepreneur. Okay, that's the setup. That's what's expected. So let's talk about what you're going to say when it's your moment to have 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 minutes to pitch. All right, and we're going to start with the best pitches of all time. So there's a benchmark. Like there's a set of pitches out in the world that are undisputably the best of all time. Now, they're not company pitches, they're product pitches, but it doesn't really matter. All right, the best pitches of all time were Steve Jobs when he came back as the CEO of Apple and was telling us about the iPod and the iPhone and the iMac and so forth. And probably the iPhone introduction is the best of all time. Absolutely. Ooh, I got a shadow on my face there. All right, now when you go and you watch these, and they're online, and you should go watch these, watch how he's presenting. Watch how relaxed he is while he's presenting. Watch how he's not rushing to tell you the next thing. Nor is he telling you everything about these products even. He's just telling you enough to get you excited to go and look at the website at the price and the specs, or to go get in line to go buy one. And notice behind him. So he's standing on a stage and he's got a really friendly audience, right? So it's a slightly different setup than what we're talking about here, in terms of pitching a company. But notice what's behind him. Big pictures. How many words are on this slide? None. How many words are on this slide? Right? One big number and a few words to tell you what the number is. Like when he's talking about an important statistic about his company, there's one big number on the screen and basically nothing else. The text is just there, so there's some context. More often than not, it's just a picture that is backing up what he's saying. So the audience has two choices while they're listening to your presentation. They can either listen to you or they can read the words on the slides. That's their two choices. And so which one do you want them to do? Do you want them to stop listening to whatever you're saying and read the slide? Or do you want them to actually listen to you and pay attention to what you're saying? Well, you have the choice. You have control over which one of those things they do. I highly advocate that they listen to you. That was the whole point. You finally got in front of these investors. You finally got your 5, 10, 20-minute chance. You don't want to have them go off and read something and not pay attention to you. So the first rule on how to do that is don't give them anything to read. Is literally just tell them a story verbally with a little bit of backup material behind you. And occasionally, when you watch the Steve Jobs pitches, occasionally there are slides with words on them. This is the equivalent of bullet points in the format of an Apple presentation. And so when he got to this point and he wanted to tell you all the cool things about the A4 chip, he would actually stop and talk about these things. But he wouldn't repeat the words that are sitting here on the screen, right? He would say Apple A4, but then he would talk about whatever was on here, and it was just backing up what he was saying. So people could see what he was talking about because there's a lot of numbers on here, right? People aren't going to be able to listen to 32, 7.2, 5.8. He may not even say 7.2 and 5.8. He just may say has a really fast radio. And I don't remember on this specific pitch. And again, when he got to the price, yeah, one big number on the screen and nothing else, right? Just so that everybody knew $4.99 was not $4.99. It was $499. And everyone can see it. It's a humongous piece of text on the screen, and that's it. Besides some, I think that was some broken glass or something on there. He also used lots of pretty pictures of the product, right? Whatever you're selling, right? Trees or fruits and vegetables, or even organic fertilizer, you have the ability to take pretty pictures, right? Everyone has a camera in their pocket right now. Take pretty pictures of your product and show them off. That will excite investors. All right. So when you're watching these, and I'll give you the URL in a second, just notice how simple he talks. He doesn't use any complicated words. He uses simple English at all times. He uses as few words as possible. He pauses a lot when he's presenting, which may seem like he doesn't know what he's supposed to say, but that's not why he's pausing. He's pausing in order to let the audience catch up. He told them something, it's surprising. You got to add a pause so that the brain of the audience can catch up before you give them the next fact. And just notice how practiced he is. He practices presentations 100 times. And you're going to say, no, that's crazy. He didn't, no, he really did. He practiced those presentations for months. He practiced them dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of times. And it makes a huge difference. So, I've been doing this for 30 years. I'm not quite as good as Steve, but I'm getting there. And when I have a brand new presentation that I've never presented before, it comes out a little bit wrong. It comes out at the wrong pace. I don't hit all the right notes and whatnot. But when I practice something 30, 40, 50 times, which I've done many times in the last decade, then it comes out so much better. It just comes out so much smoother. And by the time I get to 100, I've pitched Africa Eats over 100 times now, probably 1,000 times. I can do it in my sleep. It is totally smooth, and it comes out, and people just feel the confidence. And I know you don't want to do that. Yeah, I've met very few entrepreneurs who want to actually go and practice their pitch even 20 times, but it will make a huge difference to you. Okay, and there's the URL, and we'll put we'll send the slides off on Mighty Networks for you to see, but you can just search for iPhone pitch on YouTube and find it. Okay, so that's the benchmark. That's the best possible pitch ever. Let's talk about something more real. Let's talk about a real pitch from one of my fledglings. This one's from Fledge back in, oh my God, like 2016, I think. It is African. It's not in food and ag. It's not restorative. It's a fintech company. But it's a real company and a real pitch deck, something we put together while they were, while this company was here in Seattle at Fledge Seattle in, again, like 2016. I think I updated the dates. I updated the date to be 2020, just so it doesn't feel that old. But still, it looks 2 years old now. Okay, and I'm going to pretend to be David Opio when I'm pitching this, just so it's natural. I said the founder CEO is the one who's supposed to pitch. At the time, David was the CEO. He's no longer there. But here's what he would do. He would step up on stage, and the first thing out of his mouth would be this: access to financial services is a fundamental human right. There's 1 billion people out there who are farmers, right? It's the biggest industry on the planet. Almost, most adult humans on the planet are farmers. But there's a problem. The problem is that most of them are unbanked. Here in Uganda, that's 28 million people. 28 million people in Uganda do not have access to banks on a daily basis. They don't have an easy way to save money. Oh, and I know this I know this personally because my mom's a farmer, and my mom does not have a bank account. She's never had a bank account in her life. The way that the farmers solve this problem and have been solving this problem for years is saving and credit co-ops. In Uganda, we call them SACCOs. And they work okay, but they're not great because they're paper-based. They're literally a bunch of farmers who sit around with paper ledgers, and they lose money. On average, they lose like $20,000 a year because of either bad record keeping or a little bit of a theft. And just inefficient, right? I show up as a farmer, I hand them some money, and I hope they keep track of it for me. So we have a solution for that. It's called MOBIS, right? Mobile Banking and Information Software. We take the back end of these SACCOs and we put it out into the cloud. And we put the front end of the SACCO, we put that on the mobile system. So now when a farmer goes and deposits some money in the SACCO, they get a text message showing them that they made a deposit, showing them their balance. At any time, they can go check their balance on their phone. If they want to move money around to someone else in the SACCO, they can do that on their phone. If they want to apply for a loan, they can do that on their phone. Totally modern system, right? So what does it give you? For the SACCOs, it makes them transparent. It gets rid of all that untrustworthy paper, right? So now the farmers can trust that the SACCO is doing a good job, and it makes the SACCO so much more efficient because all the hard work's being done in software. And on the farmer side, again, they see this transparency. They can see their account. They can see what money they have saved up. It's much simpler for them to use, and it's mobile. It's in their pocket at all times. So the opportunity for this in Uganda is huge. There's 5,000 SACCOs in Uganda. And this is a common idea around the whole continent of Africa. There's 300,000 of these over in Kenya. Over there, they call them chamas. Our business model is pretty simple. We charge $1,000 per year per SACCO, and then we charge a 0.5% transaction fee for all the transactions flowing on this system. Now, we've been doing this for only 9 months, brand new company, but in the first 9 months, we signed up 500 SACCOs already. There's 40,000 farmers that are using our system. We're managing $500,000 in savings equivalent in shillings. And we're managing $200,000 of loans. So where's this go? Well, we see by next year, it's going to grow to $250,000 in income and 200,000 farmers. And then we are predicting 3 years after that, it's going to grow 10 times bigger to $2.5 million of income and 2 million farmers. Hi, my name is David Opio. I'm not going to try and pronounce my last name. I got a great team working on this. I got my co-founder, Oteem. He's the COO and in charge of the programming team. And then we have 6 other people who are salespeople and agents and marketers who are out there grabbing those SACCOs and bringing them to us. But that's not enough. The government of Uganda knows this is a problem. They know that the inefficiency and corruption is there. And so they have created a new law that says all the SACCOs have to be in the cloud by 2025. And Nsumbuko is listed in that on the top of the list as solutions to get solutions to get SACCOs up into the cloud. We're also supported by Fledge. We just attended the Fledge Accelerator. We just got an investment from Fledge. With that, we're out raising $250,000 of new capital. We're doing that as Series A equity with a $1 million pre-money valuation. We have the first $75,000 committed, including $20,000 from Fledge. And with that, we're going to launch some new savings services and ramp up our marketing and sales to grab the rest of the SACCOs in Uganda. Thank you. Remember that we think access to financial services is a fundamental human right. If you have any questions, I'm here for you. Okay, that's what a pitch looks like, right? And it's not the smoothest thing. I have done this one about a dozen times. I have not practiced it 100 times. And I'm not David, it's not my company. So every once in a while I get hung up on how to do it, but that's more or less what a pitch should look like. All right. There's an expectation. We talked about expectations earlier. There's an expectation by investors that we're going to cover 12 or so topics. And here's the list of topics. This is straight out of the book. And the order doesn't really matter. The expectation is the problem comes first and then the solution and then the rest of the stuff. Which order they show up in just matters how well it flows. Every company is a little bit different. Were all these topics covered? And the answer is no. This pitch was put together to be 5 minutes. I think it's 6 minutes. You can actually watch David present it if you just search for Nsimbuko and Fledge. It's on my website. Because we only had 6 minutes, we didn't have time to cover all these topics, so we skipped some. Right? But we covered the important ones. Well, we kind of skipped over competition and uniqueness. All right, let's go back through this deck one more time, slide by slide, so I can tell you why each slide is there and what it's trying to say. All right, so rule one, when you're putting together a pitch deck, rule one is that each slide exists to tell one and only one piece of the story. So what you should be able to do, if I ran through your pitch deck with you, which I've done hundreds of times with people before, one of my questions would be, why does this pitch exist? What is the purpose of this one slide? And you have to be able to answer that in 2 or 3 words. And if you have 3 or 4 sentences to talk about that one slide, like why that slide exists, not what it says, but why it exists, then it should be more than one slide. And if you don't have an answer, then you have an extra slide. Right? So it comes up pretty easily when you have a complicated slide with a lot of text. Often it should be 2. Okay, we start with the title screen. So this is a standard looking first slide of a pitch deck. And I've seen tens of thousands of pitch decks. This is your first impression. Right? So for some reason, you got all the way to the point where the investor is looking at your pitch deck. These days, here in the 2020s, usually you got to send it to them first. Usually they're going to see something and then agree to meet with you. You might be able to get away with sending them an email and a quick overview and having them not see this until the presentation. That happens sometimes, but even then, if it's a pitch day, this is their first impression of your company. So you want to make a good first impression, right? Well, you make a good first impression by having a pretty logo and a good name. And I can't tell you how many companies I've come across that have names that make no sense. And I don't remember what Nsimbuko means, but it doesn't mean it doesn't come across with any negative connotations in my head. So it's fine. And the logo is a little weird because it looks like it's a agriculture company, but it's pretty, right? So it's fine, right? You just notice like the little subtle thing, like the color of the eye is slightly different. The color of the leaves is slightly different than the color of the rest of the text. It just adds a little bit something. It makes it a little more professional. And it certainly doesn't look like it was hand drawn in 5 minutes. It looks like an artist was tackling this. It's important, right? Spend a little time and money on a logo. It will make a difference. Okay, second thing you see on here is there's what I call a hint.
Nous voyons ici, c'est ce que j'appelle une astuce. Les premiers mots, par exemple, que David a dit, mais cela donne une idée par rapport aux activités de cette entreprise. Peut-être c'est grâce au nom, peut-être si vous dites les engrais et vous mettez votre
Nsimbuko and you do organic fertilizer, I need to know you're in the fertilizer space. All right, and the 2 other things on this slide, we have the name of the presenter and we have something that's a date. And the reason why there needs to be something like a date here is it's going to take months before this deal closes. And very likely the investor is going to say no. But the investor may hear of you another year later and they'll go, "Oh, I saw Nsumbuko pitch," and they pull up the pitch deck that they have on their hard disk, and it'll tell them, "Oh, okay, I saw them at the beginning of 2020." Right? That's important to let them know when this pitch is from, because the pitch will change over time. So this can be month and year, or it can be specific date, or it can just be quarter. Okay, so we're going to talk three things per slide. So slide one, what should it have? It should have your logo, a hint, your name, presenter's name, and a date. Okay, and what should you say when you're on slide one? Yeah, you should not say, I'll tell you what you should not say. You should not say, "Thank you for inviting me here." Even though that's polite, you shouldn't say that. You should not say, "Hi, my name is David Opio, and I'm here to present Nsumbuko to you." That's really boring. What you should say is something interesting, right? Or you should just go to slide 2 and start presenting. Those are your two choices. And 999 out of 1,000 entrepreneurs will say, "Hi, my name is David Opio, and I'm here to present you Nsumbuko." It's just the common thing that everyone says, and it is totally useless. It is a waste of 10 seconds of your pitch. What you want to say is something really interesting that grabs their attention, and then you got to hold that attention for the rest of the pitch. Right? And in terms of how you do that, you do that by not putting anything on that slide that isn't words you're going to say. So that tagline on there is that opening line, and nothing else. And it's totally fine if you don't say anything at all on slide 1. You go straight to slide 2 and start pitching there. Okay, which is slide 2. So here we are on slide 2. We do have some words on this slide. 1 billion people are farmers, the world's biggest industry operating. So this is a little bit of a hint to the person presenting on what they're supposed to say, right? And that's useful for the first 20 times you pitch it. But after that, you should know what you're going to say. Secondly, it's mostly images. Right. And these are all images straight off the internet, except for this one on the bottom. That's David and I think Otim. But these are just images we grabbed off the internet to make the feeling of farming. And you know what? We probably could have just done this one big image in the whole slide if we wanted to. You don't need to do 5 or 6 images. One is usually enough. And that could be the whole thing. It could just be, this image and 1 billion people. That could be the whole slide. That would be sufficient. But this style that we're using in this particular pitch deck is a few words at the top, images on the bottom. Black in the problem section, white in the solution. So slide 2 is all about the problem. It's almost always about the problem, right? As little text as you can have, right? If it's a known problem, if we're talking about hunger, if we're talking about poverty, if we're talking about climate, you don't have to say much. You can simply say, "We're tackling climate," and then move on to slide 3. And now you have more time for the rest of your pitch. Here, we needed to set up a little bit more because it's a fintech. It's about poverty, but it's not directly about poverty. Okay, what do you say on this slide? You're going to say just enough to make them understand what the problem is. We don't need to go deep. It's not a dissertation about the problem. You're not here to lecture them about this problem. You're just here to educate them and make sure that they understand which problem you're solving. Because if you're not solving a problem, then you're not going to get that investment. Right? Investors know that companies that solve problems make money. Companies that have solutions that nobody cares about, they're just not going to get funded. A huge mistake that people make is taking too much time talking about the problem. I have seen many 5-minute pitches where 3 minutes were spent on the problem, right? Where 4, 5, 6 slides were spent talking about the problem over the course of 3 minutes. And it was a 5-minute pitch or a 10-minute pitch and 5 minutes was spent on the problem. You're going to spend under a minute, ideally like 25, 30 seconds, and then you're going to move on. Right? And what's the design? Again, I like one big image. This one had a few more, but I like one big image all the way across the screen, wall to wall, top to bottom, text on top of it, or a little bar of text at the top, or a little bar of text at the bottom. That makes it look more professional. That makes it look more elegant. That makes it look like you're smarter. Like literally these slides that are mostly pictures makes you look more like Steve Jobs. Again, remember Steve Jobs? And his slides, they were almost all just pictures. Okay, then next slide. We're on slide 3 here, and it's not the solution slide. There's often one slide between problem and solution, and it's not another problem either. It's who has this problem. It's either who has this problem, or it's a trend, or there's a few different things that can go here. But in this case, whose problem is this specifically? We talked about 1 billion farmers, but we're clearly not we're not the kind of company at 9 months old that's going to solve the problem for 1 billion people. So who are we solving this problem for? We're solving it for the people in Uganda, right? The unbanked people in Uganda, like my mom, which is always just one of those ah moments, right? Who have limited access to financial services. So I have the text I need. In this case, it's top and bottom. You know, where you put it is up to you. And this image here is side to side. It's cropped, right? The whole image is taller. But I grabbed the image. I made sure I didn't warp the image, right? David's face is not squished or squashed or too tall or whatnot. This is the right aspect ratios. It's what we say. So the image has been pulled to be the size of the screen and then cropped to fit where we needed it. Okay, so what are we going to say on this slide? We're going to talk about the customer. Who are we selling to? In this case, the business is a little more complicated. We have 2 customers, the Sakos and the farmers, but really the Sakos are farmers. So we're selling to farmers. Ideally, we're going to talk about our first customer or one of our first customers, like a real person. Makes for a better story as a pitch. If we can, we might talk about three different types of customers. If we have 3 different kinds of customers, it's 3 different people. We might split the screen into 3/3 in order to talk about the 3 people. 3s work better than 2s, right? There's some magic in pitching around, in all of marketing, around 3. But typically, we're just going to talk about that one customer who already said yes, that we can talk to, is we can answer real questions, right? Mercy bought my product. Okay, who does Mercy work for, and what's she like, and why did she pick you? And you can actually answer these questions because it's a real person. Okay, your talking points are to ideally make it as personal as possible, and this is why real people work better, because they're real people. That's a real picture of a real person who really has this problem, who really thought enough to buy your product. Like, you can't get any better than that. And in terms of the design, I keep saying this, 1 or 2 big images, as little text as you can get away with. Okay, now we're up to slide 4, I think, if I get that number right. In this case, it could be it could be a trend. It could be the solution already, but we have 1 extra slide in this pitch deck before we get to the solution. We have what I call the wrong solution slide. So again, it has the same exact format as the previous slide. The picture's the same height as before. It's a little fuzzy because it's the best picture we could find. Ideally, we'd find a better picture, but I literally didn't have a better picture. The format's exactly the same with the text on the top and bottom. Again, that varies from pitch deck to pitch deck. But in this case, it's a trend, which is, okay, this problem is being solved. Like, we're showing that this is not a problem no one cares about. It's a problem that lots of people care about, and there's a solution to it. It just happens to be a wrong solution, or a non-ideal solution, or a solution that could be improved upon. And so that's what we're talking about on the slide. What we literally said is, if you remember my words, I explained how it's solved. I said Sakos are the solution. And then I explained later why they don't work so well. And in terms of design, consistency is really useful. It's not necessary. There are other ways to do this, but it's really helpful if your slides follow a common pattern over and over again. All right, somebody's not on mute. Okay, we get to the next slide, and it changes format on purpose. Right, so we're not going wall to wall on the pictures. We have 2 pictures side by side. It's got a different color scheme. I did this on purpose to try and get from the problem into the solution. It's the only pitch deck I've ever done like this. Everyone else has the same colors. These days, this is again 6 years old. These days, I almost always use a plain white background. One more thing, if you're new to PowerPoint, you get excited about these templates. and animations and what. Don't use any of that. Plain white background is perfect. Nothing else. Like nothing in the corners. The logo, Nsumbuko logo, shows up a lot in this one. Not necessary. That's kind of an old-fashioned thing to do as well. I like white backgrounds these days. I used to like black backgrounds because we used to use projectors a lot back then. These days, because everything's on Zoom, we don't use projectors anymore. So I like white backgrounds. Anyway, we're on to the next slide. Again, it still has the text on the top and bottom. And here we have the logo of the product. And this is the solution slide. This is our solution to the problem. This slide, notice, it's not telling you everything about this product. It's just introducing the product to you at a very, very high level. So that's the solution slide. The first impression of the solution, just showing it off, ideally with a pretty picture. Again, if you're doing organic fertilizer, go out on a sunny day and take the prettiest picture you can of your fertilizer, or happy farmers putting fertilizer on plants, like something with smiles that looks nice or just shiny. And again, not every detail. Remember, the purpose of the pitch is to get to the conversation later. And the purpose of slide 5, the purpose of the solution slide, is just to give them just enough information about the solution to make them want more information. All right, so what do you say? Yeah, again, as little as you need to say to get them to want to know more. And the design, again, should be a picture of the actual product or service. If you've got a ag tech company, picture of the screenshot, or picture of people looking at screens, picture of people on the computer, picture of the fruits and vegetables, picture of, pictures of what you're actually doing. Okay, then we go one level deeper. Usually you're going to have 2 or 3 slides that actually talk about your solution. So the first one here was just a high level explanation of what it was. And the next one is benefits. Like, why would the customer care? Not the features. I'm not listing out the features of the mobile system and, how many button presses does it take to pull up your balance. These are the benefits to these 2 sets of customers. Okay. Often this will be where the screenshots are. We didn't have any screenshots when we made the deck, so we just did benefits. Ideally, literally, it would be like a screenshot of the PC doing the Sako backend and a screenshot of the mobile system, and we would just talk about the benefits, as words, as talking points, as we just show off the pretty design of the system. In terms of what you say on the slide, you just go one level deeper. Again, not every single level of, not all the detail, just one more level of detail, just another 35, 45, 1 minute of information about the product. And again, as one level deeper in terms of detail on what you're going to show. Okay, then we get to something, it comes earlier in the book. I don't know if we talked about this in week 1 or not. It's the opportunity. So now that the audience understands what the problem is and how we're solving it, the next thing we need to do is get them excited about how big this opportunity is. Sometimes this comes earlier in the pitch. Sometimes you'll go, problem, we had 1 billion people, and then we had a certain number of unbanked in Uganda. Sometimes the next thing you would do is show the opportunity, and you would say, and now there's 5,000 of them have this problem. But in this case, we needed to explain what a Sako was. So we did that first. Now we're coming back to the problem. So we have a solution, and this solution has 5,000 potential customers in Uganda. And then neighboring, because that's not a very big number. The reason why we put this down here instead of stopping there is 5,000 is not big enough. If it was 50,000, we would not put this number. If it was 500,000, we wouldn't put this number. But 5,000 just didn't feel big enough. So we just grabbed another number from Kenya. Company is, here we are 6-7 years later. The company's talking about going to Kenya. We're still not there yet. So this is just there to have a bigger number on the screen. Okay, literally what you want to show off is a big number. And you can go back and read the next step on how to do an opportunity size exercise. But what you're trying to come up with is a big number that's either number of customers or size of the market in in dollars or your local currency. But that's what you're trying to show here, is something that makes the audience lean forward and say, oh, this is interesting, right? As an investor. Sometimes what you'll say is that quick top-down analysis that explains how you got to this number. Sometimes it's a bottom-up way to explain, some way to justify why this number is true. And literally how you design this is 100-point font. As big a number as you can fit on the screen. Okay, again, going back to Steve Jobs and his giant numbers on the screen. Okay, and we're moving on to the next slide, and the next slide explains the business model. Somewhere, and this is often one that people forget, you have to explain how customers pay you, right? It's no use having a business unless the customers are going to pay you, so explain it. And in this particular business, there's two parts to it. So we have this screen, and we're using widescreen format, which everyone should be using. It's the 2020s. The default in PowerPoint's not widescreen, but you should hunt it down and find it and use it. And on this screen, we're using the fact that it's wide to have two different numbers. And so we have our $1,000 a year fee on one side, and we have our other business model on the other side. Nice and simple, that's it. We don't have to explain, if let's say we had three prices for Sacos, 1,000 for small ones and 5,000 for medium ones, and 10,000 for big ones. Yeah, we're just going to ignore that. We're going to make it simpler. We're just going to take the average price, or we're going to take the price that most people are going to pay. Like, we're not going to explain the entire business model on one slide here. We're just going to show that we have a business model and roughly what it is, so that the investors are happy to see that we know how to make money. That's it. How do you make money? That's the point. That's the point of this slide. And what you're going to say is as little as you can to explain how customers pay. Right? Customers sign up as a subscription. Customers buy, they buy bags, or they buy pallets, or they buy seasonally, or we export and we ship them out in containers. Like, what is the unit that you sell, and what does it cost? And in terms of design, sometimes you need something a little more. Sometimes you need a price list. If it's a single price, nice and simple, big number on the screen. If you have a price list, you could show it, and you could show the small, medium, and large price, but you just focus on the middle one. Sometimes you need a diagram because it's complicated, and if so, draw a diagram. But again, simplify it as much as you can. Okay, we finally get to the next slide, and this one's called traction. And this is where some of that feedback from earlier, where you said, I haven't been funded yet. I heard some frustration in there. What investors want these days, and again, we'll talk about this for the realities of funding, but what investors want is traction. And so traction can be one number. It could be we signed up 500 Sacos. That would be okay. But this slide has four numbers on it. This slide has 500 Sacos and 40,000 farmers. And we could have stopped there. That would have been a pretty good slide. Except the numbers keep getting bigger. So then, how much money are we managing? Well, we're managing $500,000 of money from smallholder farmers. That's not an insignificant amount of money. So we wanted that number too. All right. And three numbers would have been fine too. We could have centered this over here. But in this case, we just made it nice and simple, and it's four numbers. They're all good. They're all seemingly big. They're all impressive for a company that's 9 months old. So we didn't simplify it down. If you can simplify it to one number, just do one number. All right. So this is the traction slide. This is where you show that customers care about your product. And that's important, because if I have two choices as an investor, one that just sounds really cool and the other one sounds less cool but has customers, I'm going to pick the one with customers. Like, even that shiny one over there that's invented something new, yeah, it's nice. But this other one over here has customers and revenues. I like customers and revenues. The odds of me getting my money back are much higher when they have customers. So show me that. Right? And what do you talk about? You talk about whatever how many customers you have and why they're so happy. Right? You talk about things that make the audience believe that more customers will show up. That's basically what you're talking about. It might not just be a number. Maybe you have a graph. So maybe you've been around for 3 years And so you have three numbers. You have at least the three annual numbers. So make a graph and show it goes up. Maybe you've only been around for a year, but you have monthly numbers and every month goes up, or almost every month goes up. Great. Show a graph going up, right? Up and to the right is good. Investors like to see graphs that go up and to the right. And you don't need any other words except for whatever the number is that you're showing, right? And why. Okay, somebody asked at the beginning, how do you show your financial model? And the answer is you don't. You show a very, very simplified summary of your financial projections. And personally, what I like to see is both actuals and projections in the same thing. So, this slide deck's supposed to be from about here, like supposed to be in this moment of time between the end of 2019 and the end of sometime during 2020, where we don't know what 2020's revenue is going to be. So this is supposed to be a real number that happened in the past, and then these are projections out into the future. That's how we're showing this. And this is literally a slide format that I keep using over and over with this just PowerPoint arrow going up and to the right, although my arrow's gotten smaller over the years. I'm just noticing that now. So here we have a repeat of our traction. We have that 40,000 farmers and $50,000 of income. This is one place where we might lose the audience, because we said we had 500 SACCOs, and we said that they pay us $1,000 a year. And so if we have 500 SACCOs and they pay us $500,000, sorry, do that again. If we have 500 SACCOs as customers and they pay us $1,000 a year, why do we only have $50,000 of revenue? We're off by a factor of 10. So an astute investor will notice that and will ask, oh, wait, why is your revenue so low? And that's fine, because they're now engaged and they're asking questions. And the answer is, oh yeah, well, okay, we have 500 SACCOs using the system, but they're not all paying it. Totally fine answer, right? Having them use it is more than halfway there toward purchasing. The other thing that the investor, the audience, is going to do is they're going to do some math in their head. They're going to say, okay, this is 5 times growth, and that's 5 times growth, right? So going from 50 to 250 is 5 times. Going from 40 to 200 is 5 times. So that jives. That makes sense. If we were going from 40,000 to 2 million, but we were only going from 50,000 to 250, then there's something wrong. And the audience is going to question that either verbally, or they're just going to, without even telling you, they're going to go no. In their head, they went, no, this entrepreneur doesn't know what they're doing. They can't grow 10 times on one factor and 5 times on another. That just doesn't make any sense given everything they just told me. And then you've lost them. So you got to keep consistent on these numbers. And then the same thing happens here. This is 10 times bigger and 10 times bigger. And the question that the audience will have is, okay, is that reasonable? Can they grow 10 times bigger? How many SACCOs do you have to sign up to get $2.5 million of revenue? This is probably too big a number. Realistically, like this probably should be $1 million and 500,000 farmers, right? And that would be more realistic, but it would be a lot smaller opportunity, realistic opportunity, and investors might say no because the size of the revenues was too small. It's hard to balance. You got to be aggressive in your growth, but not unbelievable. And you have to be not too conservative in your growth projections, because then the investors are going to say no because it's not a big enough opportunity for them. There's a sweet spot in there somewhere, and you only figure out what that is by getting feedback. Unfortunately, the best place to get the feedback is the investors, and so you turn off some investors while you're trying to find the right numbers. It's a no-win situation at times. Okay, so here we are on the financial projection slide. I already explained what it's showing you and why. There can be some other KPIs on here besides the revenues. You can show your expenses. I've seen lots of graphs that do revenues, expenses, and net. So you can see when the company breaks even, if it's not breaking even yet. Typical is to show 3 or 5 years into the future. You basically want to show where this company's headed. Like, how big can this company get? And you stop when the company gets big enough that it's exciting to investors. That's why it's 3 or 5 years. What you talk about is you talk about what's going to happen, right? And remember when I pitched it, I was just like going through those milestones. And in terms of the design, anything that goes up and to the right is good. Like that's generally what's expected. Normally that would be an Excel graph that's pasted in here. Okay, moving on. We're on the team slide. Now notice how much bigger David is than everyone else. This is a little bit excessive for that. David had a little ego. But the founder CEO should be bigger than everyone else. The co-founders should be bigger than the staff. And just note here, I'm not even putting names on the people on the staff because the point of the slide is to show that there is a team. I do not need bios of everyone on the team, right, as the audience, as an investor, not on the first pitch. I just need to know that there is a team. I need to know that they're a happy team, which is why most of them are smiling. But like these two guys should be smiling. Like he's kind of smiling, but this guy's just mean. Like he's upset. He doesn't want to have his picture taken. Everybody should be smiling. It just helps make everything look better. Ideally, everybody has the same background. Like you just go around one day and take good pictures of everyone with a good camera. That just makes everything seem a little more.
Quick question. What do you think about the group picture of a team if somebody has something like that?
Group pictures are fine. They just get outdated really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Like group, like you get that group picture and then 6 months later, it's the group picture plus one picture on the side. That looks worse than having headshots.
Perfect.
So I just like headshots, and I just like, you can put, if you can squeeze this a little smaller, you can put people's names next to here or what they do, but it literally is not that important. And I've seen many pitches where they spend 3 minutes talking about the team. Like, oh, here's Bob. Bob's our head of operations, and he's great. He used to work for, and they named 4 other companies I never heard of. Like, I don't need to know that. I just need to know you have everything covered. And if you don't, if you're like missing marketing person, it's fine. You put a circle there and say TBD marketing. And in your ask slide, you say we're going to be hiring a marketing person because we need them. That's totally fine as well. But it's a first pitch deck. So just show me the people you have. That's fine. Okay, so on the team slide, your talking points here is where I like people to introduce themselves. Like I said, don't at the beginning, don't say, hi, my name is David Opia. I'm here to present you Nsimbuco. Well, you got to introduce yourself somewhere. This is a good place to introduce yourself. Hey, hi, my name is David Opia. I'm the founder and CEO of Nsimbuco. We have a great team. Almost everyone says we have a great team. You can say it too. It's a cliche, but it's totally fine. And then again, within a minute, explain who's on your team and why. And I already went over the design. Okay, this one's not a normal slide. This would be the next two kind of glum together. There's usually a slide that comes next that talks about all your partners. In this case, we split out the one for Uganda because it was, at the time, a really big deal. It turned out not to be as useful as we thought. But at the time, having Nsimbuco listed in an endorsed thing from the government of Uganda, that was just sounded amazing, sounded equivalent to another piece of traction. And so we made it its own slide. And so I'm just showing these two. Normally we would have like the government of Uganda logo, the Fledge logo, and the Land Accelerator logo. And you might as well pick the WRI logo too, because you're in the program run by them. And the AFR 100 logo, because they're funding this program. And any other support you got. Tony Alumelu. This is also a good place to put your advisors if you have them on this slide. Kind of, the team is bigger than just those people on the previous slide. That's what this slide is for. If you want any awards, it would go on this slide as well. So it's kind of showing that other people care about this company, not just you and your founders and whoever you hire. Okay, and your talking points are really short. We have great partners. We've been part of this program or we won this award, and then move on. Right? You don't need to dwell on it. You just need to show it. As many logos as you got. The logos is the best thing on here. You don't even need any words. Okay, we finally get to the ask. So we're building up. The ask is going to be the second to last slide, always. People get this wrong all the time. You build up to your ask. Sometimes the team goes before the financials so that we can do like business model, historic and future financials ask. That's a pretty good order. So we get the team earlier so that we can get that flow. But however we got here, we get to the ask. And the ask is, how much money are you raising? That's it. That's what we're trying to show here. How much money are you raising? Not how much money are you looking for? Not how much money do you hope to find? No other words work as well as we are raising. So the difference here is, if we're looking for $250,000, it implies we don't have any. If we are if we are hoping for $250,000, and it sounds like we have absolutely nothing and little hope. If we are raising $250,000, it implies we're in the middle of the process and that we have some committed already. And it may or may not be true, but those words, we are raising, that's what it puts in the mind of the investors. And it makes it sound like they need to step up and start asking questions now, or they might miss out. You don't want to sound like you're desperate. You never want to raise money sounding desperate. You always want to raise money sounding like you already have it. Because the one thing that makes investors excited more than anything else is a deal that's already been invested in. Then they want to put money in there. We'll talk about that in the realities of funding, but that's just a reality. So here we are on the ask slide, and we got a big number on the screen again, but we have to have some other information on this as well. So we have the big number. Sometimes it's off in the corner here, but I made it as big as possible on this slide. We need to explain to them what terms that comes in. So here's where you might have to do some homework. You may be pitching some organization that just does loans today, in which case, don't ask them for equity. You have to switch this to be a loan. And then tomorrow you might be pitching an org that just does equity, in which case you got to ask for equity. And then you might go the next day to an investor that does debt and equity, in which case ask for the one you want. And then in this case, we're saying $75,000 committed because that helps, helps show that other investors like this deal already. And then we need a list of use of funds is what it's called. We need a list of things this money is going to get spent on, 3, 4, 5 bullet points, not more than 5. Right, 2 is a little bit short on this one. It should be 3, but we should in fact explain what the saving services are, but we didn't in this one. We don't need the logo of the company. If we haven't figured out what company's pitching by now, then you haven't done a good job. But this pitch deck still has that. So we're going to end with that ask. If you're not raising money, you got to ask for something. Otherwise, why did you just spend time pitching? So it happens sometimes that you just finished raising money, but you had an opportunity to pitch. Ask them for something else. Ask them for customers, or ask them for another partnership or something. You have to ask for something. And again, we're going to use the words "we are raising." Really important. You're going to forget it. You're going to get to your ask slide and you're going to go, Looney said I was supposed to use some words. I can't remember what it was. We're looking for $250,000. That's not it. So, write this down. We are raising, and then how much money. And it can be in local currency is fine. Most African investors invest in dollars. So there's nothing wrong asking for money in dollars. And again, in terms of what you're going to say, it's going to be as little as you can get away with. You're going to want to get to questions as soon as possible. Right. So you should be running out of time about now. And you can say, we're raising $250,000. We have $75,000 lined up already. And the use of funds is adding to our list of services, marketing, and sales. Then we get to the final slide. The final slide, what you're going to do is you're going to make a copy of your opening slide. Right. So we want the logo and the name of the company in the same spot, more or less. We might move it up if we need more space. But now what we're going to do is contact information on the bottom. So we have David's full name and his email address, which doesn't work anymore, and a phone number, which may or may not work, don't know. And then on the right side, how to find more information about this company. That's it. Okay. And what we're going to say on this slide, so we have the final slide. And what we're going to say on this slide is a closing line. And it could be a repeat of your opening line, or it could be a riff on your opening line. And if you go back to the Fledge presentations, you'll see what I mean about closing line. It's kind of like that one-liner we talked about in week 1. And then you're going to say any questions. And you're going to stop talking. And there might be an awkward silence. That's fine. You're just going to wait for them to ask questions. Okay. And as much as possible, it looks like slide 1. Right. So not a big slide that says questions. A lot of people do that. Close the presentation. Make it's your last chance. It may be the last thing you get to say at all. So make it count. Okay. In this particular presentation, we didn't do the competition slide. So I don't have a competition slide for Nsumbuko. I have 2 competition slides for another company. There are, and it doesn't really matter what that company does. There are 2 and only 2 ways to show competition. People get this wrong all the time. There are 2 ways to show competition. They're just expected. There's nothing special about them. There's nothing magical about them. They're just what's expected. And when you do something unexpected in a pitch deck, it turns off the audience. It turns off, especially experienced investors and professional investors. Just follow the rules. You'll do much better. So competition, here's one format for competition. It's called the magic square. Your company goes in the top right corner. Right? You can find out how to fill one of these out in the book. Your company goes in the top right corner and everything else does not. You are better. Top right is better. The other way to do it is a more common way to do it is a competitive matrix. In a competitive matrix, the competitors are in the columns and the benefits are in the rows. There's no more than 7 rows. Your company does not do everything, and your company's in the leftmost column. So what people get wrong is they don't put their company in the leftmost column, or they swap it so that the companies are in the rows and the features or the benefits are in the columns. That's totally logical. It makes total sense, to have you last in a row, but that's not where it's expected. It's expected to find your company in the leftmost column, and it's expected that the companies are in the columns. And so when I get to a competitive slide and it's not there, I have to start thinking and I have to start figuring out what this competition slide means. I don't want to think about it. All I want to do is read down these benefits and see which one you don't do. That's really all I want to do. There's kind of 2 sides to this. So what you're going to say, I think I have so what this slide exists to say is that you've done a competitive analysis, that you understand all the competitors in your space, whether they're direct competitors or indirect. Like you understand who they are and how they compare against what you're doing. And then what you're going to say, very little, very, very, very little compared to how much time you spent learning about your competition. Best way to present a competition is 3 facts. So if I go back here for a second, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns. Some of them are named competitors and some of them are big chunky categories. But we got 5 competitors to talk about, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 benefits or 5 features or 5 somethings to compare them against. That's 25 potential things to talk about. Not counting like, why did I pick these 3? And I'm only going to talk about 2 or 3. And personally, I don't like pitching the same thing every time. And so I'm going to talk about 2 or 3 different ones each time I pitch. All I'm trying to convey is that I have done my competitive analysis and that we're better. And I'm going to explain why we don't do the last one. Sorry, I didn't say that. The reason why we don't do all of them is if I'm showing my company that does everything here, then the audience is wondering, well, why do these competitors exist? Like, what am I missing? What am I failing to show them? What am I hiding? Whereas if I leave something out on the bottom here, now it's believable. Now they do something I don't do. Okay, well, why do they do this and I don't do this? Right? And it doesn't matter what it says on here. It just makes it look more believable if I don't do everything. So that's why it's like that. And all I want to know is that you're smart enough to have done it. Right? We'll dig into the competition later. we're not here to talk about the competition today. We're here to get you excited enough, or which side are we sitting on? We're here because you want me as investor excited enough to keep talking to you. So show me a little bit about your competition. Well, just enough to make me want to ask some questions later. Okay. And again, you have two choices on how to format that. Pick one or the other, not both. Probably pick the competitive matrix. It's more common. And then, talk about it for as little as possible. That's it. We made it through the whole pitch deck, right? So we made it through the title and the problem, the solution, and the customers and so forth. We explained the business model. We explained how this company is going to grow. We have an ask. We covered all the topics that an investor expects from a first pitch deck. And we did it. We can do this whole pitch in 5 minutes or less. Mine was probably 4. To see this in a little more detail, before I open this up to questions, there's a podcast series that I created. The next step has a whole podcast, has I don't know, 100 podcast episodes, 60, 70, I don't know, a lot. There's many, many, many episodes of the next step talking about different aspects of business planning. And then there's 12 or 13 episodes just on pitching. And you get to those on this URL. So back to my website /pitching. And on that page is this pitch deck and a breakdown of why everything is said on that slide by slide. So you got this lecture, and then you have a different version of it on the podcast and on this website, on this webpage. Okay, and with that, I will open it up to questions. I see a ton of things happening in the
Yeah,
chat.
I wrote a lot of questions down, and I also wanted to launch a poll for them. So you should see the poll. Everybody now can start to answer it. And the question for everybody is, what things do I want to change on my pitch deck after viewing this presentation? And you can select all that apply. These are just a few ideas that came to mind as Luni was pitching. So just an opportunity for people to answer a poll, and we can share the topics. I see some results coming in. 2 people have done it so far, so expect more. So as we do some questions, do take a look at your poll and fill it out. So after a few questions, we can see what some of the topics are. You don't have to select all of these. You can just select the ones that apply to you. So that being said, Luni, I did see a few in the chat box. Would you like me to go through them quickly?
Yeah, and why don't you do that? Actually, let's turn off recording.
Okay, great.
Not because I don't want people to hear the answers, but because I want to show off a few pitch decks.
All right.
Like Various asked, which ones don't get funded.
All right, let me pause. I'll pause the recording in case we turn it back on later.
The absolute best way to do it. Oh, we're back to recording. That works better than showing them in subsequent slides. Although you can do that. Again, Africa Eats slide 2 right now is we solve the problems of hunger, poverty, and funding. And then I go into detail on each of those. But typically when I'm pitching, I skip slides 3, 4, and 5. I will flip through them and I'll say, you already know the problems of hunger and poverty in Africa. We're not going to talk about that. So they're there if I need them, but I don't actually pitch them at all. Best is just one slide. We solve these 3 problems or 2 problems. Moving on.
And another one is, what advice do you have for adding short videos into your presentation?
We do this at the demo days in Seattle. We only do them at the beginning. So the ideal use of a video, there's 2 places you can possibly put them, but the ideal place is at the very beginning of your pitch, a 1 minute or less video. I think somebody said 5 minutes. 5 minutes is way too long. 1 minute or less video. It's usually there to explain the problem in a much more compelling manner than you can do with just words in one picture. So literally video of the hurricane wiping out a city. There's no way I could convey that in words in a picture, but a video does a great job of that. So we usually use it to grab the emotions and grab the heart of the audience. The only other place that a video is useful that I've seen is in the solution section in the background with no sound. So a video showing off the actual product, if it's like a tech product, then I need a lot of screenshots. If it's an ag product, we've never done a video in the middle. We've tried a couple other things, and most of it doesn't make the presentation better.
Yeah, I've seen people successfully embed like GIFs that repeat themselves with no sound, and can be depending on your topic. So we had this one from India who had a pest trap that would attract pests and then kind of electrocute them. So that's fun to watch.
Yeah. Okay. We got time for, we're actually over time, but let's do one last question.
Oh, okay. Let's see. I got two here. What should I do? No, number of slides for a 3-minute pitch.
3 minutes? Oh my God, maybe 9 or 10 at most, or 3. 3 or 4 is good. If you have a 3-minute pitch, you're not going to get through all those topics. If you have a 5-minute pitch, you're not going to get through all those topics that I listed. The expected list is for a 10-minute pitch. So anything less than 10, you have to drop something. I almost always drop competition first. Often I didn't do that in this one. I have a trick. If I'm only given, if I'm in a structure, if I'm mentoring someone and in a structure where it's, let's say 7-minute pitch and 7 minutes of Q&A. Well, we get 15 minutes then, right? 7 plus 7 is 15 in this case. So we know there's going to be 7 minutes of Q&A or 15 minutes of Q&A. So if we know that the format is pitch and then Q&A, let's leave something out on purpose that we know they're going to want to know, like competition or business model. And then we know what the first question is going to be. And we prep for that. So we have it all prepped and we've practiced it over and over again. And so they clearly, it happens so often. Oh, but you didn't mention competition. Can you tell us something about that? Absolutely. And then you flip to the next slide, the one after the last slide. And there's your competition answer, or there's the business model in more detail. And it's all prepped and it looks like part of your presentation because it is. And so you get to use most of that time for more presentation. So.
And look very well prepared. I think actually that was the last question. We got to the other ones actually. So we might end on this note. Mighty Networks, we're going to have the recording up in a couple of hours. I've actually put the presentations there already, so you'll get an announcement in the next 5 to 10 minutes in your inbox. If anybody's not signed up on Mighty Networks yet,
I just added 3 slides to it.
Oh, I don't have that one. I have your old one.
I will post my slides from today and Nzimbuko in a PowerPoint.
Okay. Then,
and a few other, I'll post a few other PowerPoints too, because I find it funny when everyone's using the Nzimbuko format.
True. Interesting. All right. Well,
take the ideas of it. You don't have to take it exactly. Just take the ideas of a picture across the whole thing and text somewhere. It doesn't have to be exactly this with black on the top and bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. All right. I'll see you guys next week.
Thank you, Looney.
Thank you.
Thank you, Looney. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks from Zambia.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.